All right, so if this is what we're aiming for, is to be able to create this slide. Okay. Here's why. Here's why this is so important. So, two real reasons. It's why will users give you a chance if you're going for early, if you're an early stage company? Perfect. And then why will your profits stay high? So, let's talk about each of those things here. All right. So, let's talk about this in sequence. So, here's the first reason that we need to talk about differentiation and competition as part of our slide deck. So if you're a super early company, it's funny. It's like it's actually quite challenging to convince people to give you the time of day. Like if you're a new company and you're just like reaching out over LinkedIn and maybe you're reaching out through networks saying, hey, give me some time, pay attention to me. I really want to make something new and exciting. Give me a little bit of time. Well, you've got to convince people to be able to say, hey, I do that. I'm sufficiently interested in what you're doing, and I think what you're doing is sufficiently innovative that I'm going to give you a 15-minute little bit of time to give you feedback on your idea. So the first reason why you need to be able to articulate the differentiation is, for this first reason, is because it's a prerequisite for people to actually start using your product, giving you feedback, giving you the nudge, or that early traction that's going to enable you to then get the feedback and iterate your product. So that's the first reason this slide is important. The second reason why this slide is important is this. It's why will your profits stay high? Okay, so let's imagine this. This is like a little bit of a funny one. So imagine a world where you're successful. So like you launch your startup and it ends up being has some really good early traction. People are excited about it. Well, turns out as soon as you start getting some traction, there are going to be some first followers. There are going to be some companies that say, hey, I can do that. I'm going to start doing that. It's like you had Uber and then you had Lyft. You had, there's a million examples of an early successful startup and then you had a fast follower. So as part of the differentiation, this is also called your competitive moat frequently, and technically there is a difference. I mean, not technically, there is definitely a difference between differentiation and being able to say, how are your profits going to stay high? But frequently they go together. So it's like, it could be you have some sort of a economy of scale that you're going to benefit from because you were the first mover, or perhaps you're going to have some proprietary IP. That's great. Whatever it is, we as investors need to believe that you are going to do something that's sufficiently different and sufficiently differentiated that even if people try to copy you, you're going to be able to win and you're going to be able to maintain some quite high margins. Because again, as an investor, my return is entirely based on the multiple on investment that you can achieve. And one of the factors, especially as you get more mature, is what is your profit margin. That becomes a big piece of what your margin is going to become. Okay? So that's why we care. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about on this stream. There we go. All right. So we're going to be pretty much trying to cover 4 basic things. All right. Number 1, what goes on this slide? Number 2, where do you get the data to populate the slide? 3, what are some common issues that people have when they're making this slide? And then after that, we're going to go ahead and make 1 or 2 examples. So that's the plan. And by the way, if you have any questions or if you have any comments about any of this, please drop it in the chat. I'll do my best to address questions as they come up. But cool. All right. So want to give while everyone's here, I want to give a quick thank you to J2 and FedScout. J2, I would argue, is the premier dual-use investor in the market. So if you do dual-use technology, so technology that could be funded by the government, technology that the government might want to buy, J2, I think they're the best investor out there. They really deliver for their portfolio companies. Second thank you is to FedScout. FedScout is a tool to help companies find, identify, evaluate government contracts, whether they're R&D or they're actual production contracts. So they're helping us do this podcast, do this webinar, so thank you to them. All right. Oh, and while I'm at it, so while I'm talking to you here, so just want to give a little bit about my own background, a little bit of maybe why should you listen to me? So, kind of in a nutshell, the reason why is I'm actually part of J2 Ventures, so full transparency. But I believe in the product, and over the course of the last 3 years of the J2, I've probably looked at 200, probably maybe 300 pitch decks, and this whole webinar series was just based on my own experiences, looking at a lot of decks, and frankly, seeing a lot of good prospects, like good companies, get turned down for investment because they were making some fairly foundational mistakes along the way. So this whole series is just to help you make better pitch decks so that we get a better understanding of why you're special, what it is you do, and frankly, it helps you have a better chance of getting an investment. It helps us have a better chance of making the right decisions on who we invest in. So truly think this is a win-win situation. And before that, I ran a GovTech incubator. So it was I incubated probably about 200 companies over about 10 years. Saw many of them go after dual-use venture capital. Some successful, some not. But I think I have pretty good pattern recognition about what the challenges are at this point. All right. And Michael, thanks for all the context on your capability. Definitely, like as we're working through the different examples, feel free to ask specific questions about your capability, how you do a particular step, whatever else it is. Great. All right. Cool. So that's J2. So, all right. So, here's what I think should be on every competitor slide. All right. So, slide elements. Number one is, how are users solving the need today? And this is, I want to be a little how do I say this? I want to be really clear about what I mean by this. So I think it's very common on this left-hand side, on this side right here, you'll very frequently see all of the other product solutions that are out there today. It's very common to see, just a list of other startups and maybe other big established companies that are currently providing that solution. That are currently providing products to address that thing. But I think that but I would encourage you to take a little bit more broad perspective on what's going on in this. So it's basically ask yourself, what problem am I solving? And then ask yourself, how are people solving that problem today? So if I look at Michael's example in here, he's got a heavy lift vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, I assume, that carries 1,600 pounds and can be used for firefighting. Great. That's awesome. Okay. And he says, it's text proprietary, all good things, a lot of good reasons to have it. So my expectation is that along this side, you would have a couple different things. Sorry, I just want to get this thing in focus. So I would expect that on this side, you'd have a few different things. One would be are there any other UAV type firefighting solutions? If not, that's fine. But I would expect to see, but I do know that there are planes that can pick up water, and then they fly down and pick it up out of a lake, and then they go dump that water on the fire. So you may not think of them as a competitor, but that is another way how people are solving this problem today. Is they have a plane. A second solution is they send smoke jumpers in to go address the fire in these deep woods areas. Now, are they competitors of yours? I mean, I would argue that they are. I would argue that anything that is an alternative way for your customer to solve the solution you are addressing is a competitor. Okay? So don't just limit yourself to listing out all the other startups in your space when you're making your competition list. Okay, cool. All right, so that's number one. Number two, what factors do they use to decide what to buy? All right. So looking back at our mock-up page here, this is what I'm talking about going across the top here. I would encourage you to put not all the factors that people use for buy decisions today. So pretty much every customer cares about price. So I would absolutely expect price to be one of these factors. But I would also expect there to be other reasons why people are putting their, all the other buy decision factors across the top. So as you're talking to potential users, as you're talking to potential customers, as you're doing research on the market, asking them, hey, what factors are you considering when you're buying something? And like one nice thing is that here we are in the federal market, the government actually publishes the evaluation criteria in almost all of their solicitations. And sometimes the solicitation is like really vague, be like, we're going to choose the most technically innovative, best price, whatever it is. And in those sort of situations, it's like, okay, what does most innovative mean to you? And it doesn't really give you enough information to be able to actually evaluate it. But frequently you'll see things where the government is very explicit. They'll say, hey, we're going to choose the most reliable one. We're going to choose the solution that has been used 5 times previously by similarly situated customers. And then in that sort of situation, you would want to have a factor, one of these buy factors, be, do they have 3, 5, whatever the requirement is, previous examples of that work having been done? So, because we need to, in order to evaluate ourselves against the alternative solutions, we have to know what matters to the user. Okay. So, if people have any questions, it's like Michael's point. It's like there are, but they put but people are at risk. Awesome. So for him, I would expect one of these factors to be, people's lives at risk. Great. That is a factor that I would think, that probably people are going to use when they're doing their buy decision. Cool. So that's going to be another piece of it. All right. And then the last thing we need to talk about that we're going to use to populate the slide is how does each option meet each factor? So going back to talking about this together, it's basically what's in here. So if we know, hey, these are the ways that customers are meeting the need today. These are the factors that they're using when they do a when I keep saying make buy, I apologize, it's not a make buy decision. It's just a buy decision. So how are they going to do it today? So I'll get some kind of common failures I've seen in the past. But then actually try to put something like meaningful into it. So like, what is it in here? Like, how does each of these solutions, each of these approaches to solving the need stack up against each of these buy decisions? And like this to me, as like somebody who reviews a lot of decks, this would be like the A+ answer. And it's the A+ answer for a lot of reasons. Like number one, it shows that you know your market. It shows that you know your competition, it shows that you know your customer, it shows that you know how they're making decisions, and it shows that you've really taken the time to understand how the competition stacks up along those dimensions and how you stack up against them. So this gives me a lot of confidence that you really understand what you're doing, you've done your homework, and you have a plan to win. Okay. So that to me is that's what we're going for. This is the answer that's going to get you the pitch meeting. All right. So let's talk about where we're going to get the data to actually populate this thing. So what are our source data? So number 1, user interviews. Number 2, product reviews. Number 3, USA spending. Number 4, ChatGPT. And I rarely recommend using generative AI. I generally think it's a bad decision. But this is actually one of those few times when I think it's actually a pretty good jumping off point. So just talk about each of these really quickly, and I want to start actually doing these together. So, all right, so user interviews, just what they sound like. You need to be able to talk to your customer because only your customer is going to be able to tell you how they buy, like what factors they're considering. And like if you used to be your own customer, that is awesome. Like that is one of the most helpful things in the world. But don't just rely on your own experience because like the experience you had around, hey, when I was my own customer, I made the buy decision on factors 1, 2, 3. That's great. That's awesome insight. But presumably you're not the only customer. And usually different people make the same decisions differently. So I really encourage you to go out there, do your customer discovery interviews. Like this is like classic lean startup 101. Get out there, have the conversations, ask them, what factors do you consider when you're considering buying a new product? They'll tell you. Listen to them. That's enormously valuable. Okay, cool. Number 2, product reviews. There's like most product categories, especially in the tech space, have like wonderful comparison websites. You have like G2 Exchange, Gartner, Forrester. There's a ton of websites that will say, hey, what are all the cybersecurity blah 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 solutions out there today? And here we've ranked them and given customer reviews. Great place to find your competition. Number 3, USA spending. This one is government specific, but we are all in the dual use market. We're either going after federal funding or we're going after federal contracts. So let's use the resources out there. Let's see who the government's buying from already to see who we can figure out is already doing stuff, how we compare against them. And then ChatGPT. As I was saying, I'm a little, in general, I'm sketchy on ChatGPT as a resource, just because I think it becomes too easy to think that it actually knows what you're doing, and it becomes very easy to just be like, oh, ChatGPT said this is my differentiation, or this is the strengths and weaknesses of all these other products, and use that as your answer and just move forward. I mean, if you're serious about starting a company and you really want people to entrust you with hundreds of thousands and then millions of dollars of their capital to invest into your product, I think that you have to do your own homework. So long story short, please do not just rely on ChatGPT. Cool. All right, and but like I said, if people have questions, please throw them out there. Okay. Cool. All right, let's talk about some issues that I've seen over the years. First issue is this kind of slide for people to do their competition and differentiation page. This, for some reason, I see this all the time. It's just like a 2x2 matrix where they'll say, factor 1 is, performance. Factor 2 is whatever, price. And inevitably people choose 2 factors where they are the only solution in the upper right quadrant. And then all the other competitors, all the other providers, live somewhere down here in the lower, and to the below and to the left. I just think this is it's a bad design for a few reasons. Number one, in most of the time, people don't make their buy decisions on only 2 factors. It's not just it's either going to be A or B, and I'm just optimizing along factors A and B. It's pretty rare. 99% of the time, there'll be 10 different factors. And if it may be fair enough, it may be at a top line, it may be quality and reliability may be the 2 most important factors. Great. But inevitably, quality and reliability mean different things to different customer segments. So breaking it down and be able to say, here are the 3 things that people talk about when they think of quality. Here are the 5 things that people talk about when they talk about reliability. And you just can't represent 8 different things on a 2x2 matrix. So, and that's number 1 reason why I don't like it. Number 2 reason is it's hard for me. I can't understand why you put each thing in this position, right? I can't understand why you put competitor 1 at this high on factor 1 and on this position on factor 2. It doesn't tell me anything. And it doesn't tell me that you know what's going on either. It doesn't show me that you've done your homework. Whereas by comparison, if you do it this way, now all of a sudden I can see how each of these are doing. And for extra credit, you can put these into, you can color them. So you'd be high is green, low is red, good stuff is green, bad stuff is red on the other dimensions. And then I can visually see, it's oh, okay, the company that's pitching, most of your stuff's in green. Great, all the other people's, most of their stuff's in red. You gotta be honest. But that's a really good way to help me see why you've assessed that you are the best competitor and why, by extension, customers are going to choose you over everybody else. Okay. So a couple other common issues I see with these sorts of slides is, number 1, they forget to mention the incumbent. So there's an existing provider, and they forget to mention the existing provider. It's shocking how often that happens, but don't do that. Number 2, DIY solutions. There are a lot of problems out there today that you are building a product to address that are currently being solved in-house. It may not be perfect, it may not be, it may be suboptimal, but that is what they are doing today. And you should address that. Number 3, services. You're selling products. Like the reason why you're here, the reason why you want venture capital is so that you can get money to create a product. And frequently that product is the result of is basically turning a service into a product. And that's great. That's a very successful line of approach, and we've funded a lot of companies that are trying to turn their service or a service into a product. However, if that's the case, you need to have the service as a service listed as one of the competitors. And then finally, when I see this one right here, no competition, it sets off sort of sets off alarm bells in my head. Everybody's got a competitor. If you don't have a competitor, it's actually a sign that you're not addressing a problem that's meaningful and important. Okay? Like a good example of this that kind of incorporates a few of these. I saw a deck recently. It was for surveillance UAVs, so like little pocket UAVs. It wasn't even a quadcopter; it was even a sub-quadcopter. And basically, the way that it was doing this is that it was just like you launch out of the palm of your hand. This is a military application, and you could go like what's on the other side of that wall, what's over that hill. Really clever little clever quadcopter. There's a little screen. You could be like, here's okay. I now know what's on the other side of the hill. And basically, what the deck said was that they had no competition, and they said they had no competition because it was an interesting twist on surveillance unmanned systems. It was they basically said nothing is this small. We have no competition. Well, number one, I'm not sure that's true. But number two, even if it is true, like I grew up in the Marine infantry. Like that's where I started life, and we had a solution for figuring out what was on the other side of a hill or what's on the other side of that wall. Is you climbed up there and you looked. Like that is the competition. In this situation, it's my solution. 20 years ago in the Marine infantry it was DIY. I was doing it myself. I didn't have a product to do it for me. It was a service. I was going up there and I was, yeah, right. Thank you, John. It was a service in the sense like I was the one just like, me, the RTO, maybe my squad leaders. We were going up there. We were like, crawling up to the top of the hill and like, let's see what's over there. So it was, it was a service. It was DIY, but it was also the incumbent. Like that's what everyone grew up doing. Like that's what everyone is thinking in the back of their mind. Like, hey, why should I carry around this little copter? I know how to low crawl. So my point is, when you're thinking about all of the things that populate this slide, think about it in terms of what is the problem I solve, what are the current ways the problem is being solved, / what are the competitive ways to solve that problem. And so I almost like if I had a magic wand, I would stop calling it the competition slide and I would start calling it the alternative solutions slide. Because it doesn't have to be a competitor. If it is an alternative solution, it's competitive in the mind of the customer, which means it's something that I, as an investor, am going to be thinking about. Okay. So if anybody has any questions about that, please. I always get nervous when when I'm just talking and people aren't asking questions. So please jump in. Another issue I see a lot of: buying factors are not necessarily features. Like, in general, people saying, hey, I've got a certain processor in this device, or I've got a certain, I saw in Michael's example, it was, 1,600 pounds. I've got, a certain carrying capacity. Those are features. It's like we can have this battery life, we have this processing power, we have this many pounds of lift. Great features. Typically, that's not a buying factor. Typically, a customer is not saying, I need to be able to lift 1,600 pounds, or I need to have this much processing power. They're thinking in terms of outcomes. It's, I need to be able to cover this much burning forest per sortie, or I need to be able to process this much data per minute, or I need a device that can last for X hours in the field. So beware of putting a bunch of features into your evaluation, into your slide, when you should really be putting in the buying factors instead. Okay, that's just a couple couple challenges I've seen over the years. All right, cool. But now that we've got that out of the way, let's go and actually build some slides. All right, so the first one I had, so we said we gotta have heavy lift VTOL that carries 1,600 pounds. Cool. All right. So let's start by trying to populate. Let's start by learning a little bit about this ecosystem. So we're gonna do that a few ways. Almost all of them are online. And by the way, Michael, if you know like what the answers are, feel free to just shout them out and save us all some time, which would be great. So cool. All right. So and if anybody has trouble seeing my screen, please let me know. So I put in aerial fighting, firefighting, and VTOL, just as an example. So by the way, I apologize. This is the first website. I probably should have just said what I was doing. Okay, this is the first website I encourage you to go to for the government side interest on the who your competitors might be. USAspending.gov. I think it's a pretty excellent government website. So all I'm doing is I'm just putting some keywords in aerial firefighting, VTOL. I'm also going to specify the date range, so I'm just going to choose the last couple of years. If you're doing this, I encourage you to go further back, like do 10 years of data pull. But I don't want to take too much. This site can be a little slow, so I'm going to do something a little slower right now. Okay, so here's what we can start seeing. So here's what we're going to see is the recipient. So this is who got the contract. The obligation, basically, that's how much money was spent on it. Award descriptor, unmanned aircraft. What was it for? Great. A little bit more information about them. Here's what I would encourage you to do is download it, and you can do a transaction level. I'm just going to do it at the award level. I just think it's a little bit easier. It's just a little bit more manageable, a bit of data to work with. All right, so this is going to start giving us a list of the government solution providers that are out there. All right, number 2. Let's go ahead and put this in here. Let's say, I don't know, a good example, VTOL, or maybe it says aerial firefighting products evaluation. I have no idea what we'll come up with, but so this is where I would expect to see it. It's like aerial firefighting trends, aerial water enhancer studies. So you can start finding a lot of stuff in here. But I'll be honest, so aerial firefighting is super niche, so that one might be hard. But like if we did something a little bit more mainstream, there's some really good websites out there. So it'd be like, how about just like 0-day cyber solution comparison. You'll probably get stuff like this. Yeah, it's like it's like Gartner studies, Magic Quadrant studies, intelligence report. I have no idea who these are, by the way. I have literally no idea who any of these resources are. Global cybersecurity alerts reveal survey. Let's just actually put. I think that G2 is a pretty good. So G2 is a pretty good source that does a lot of comparisons. Okay, here we go. Best cybersecurity products. There we go. So here we go. So like, this would give us some insights. Like, okay, here's what G2 thinks are the best products in a particular space. Okay, great. This could start being your reference point for who the competition is. All right, now we've got. I see the data just downloaded, but before we go like open up the data. Let's go try and look at a couple of the other resources. So, like I say, like as much as I've got issue with ChatGPT, ChatGPT is a pretty good way to go look for this. I'm gonna have to go. Oh, I've got to log in. Sorry, guys. I apologize. Boop. So cool. So this should pull me right into ChatGPT. Okay, so what are some aerial VTOL firefighting solutions? So let's see what ChatGPT comes up with. What else? I think, and then of course customer interviews. So you can go out there and you can read all about, this is great stuff, but there's nothing that beats just having a good customer conversation. But so in the span of 2 minutes, we've just identified, a couple of resources, and so you as the person making this deck would want to go through and say, okay, are there discussions of how it's being done today? And you might look at this and say, wait a minute, but they're not talking about other companies. They're not looking at, company X who's trying to compete with me. Well, that's true, but they are talking about other solutions that are out there. So like, if I look at this and like I didn't know what we'd be doing, so I have no idea if this is relevant or not, but it seems like it. But they have drone and UAV integrations. They have air tanker technologies where they go like scoop up water and drop it. Remote sensing systems. So like, you as the person building this slide would want to read through there and say, wait a minute, in the eyes of the customer, would any of these things be considered to be competitors to my product? I don't know. But if it is, if a customer might think, I could buy this product that this startup is trying to sell me, or I could use a whatever it is, enhanced air tanker technology. Well, that means that they're a that means that they're a competitor. Okay, here's a bunch of other ones. So I would encourage. So first step is go create that list of alternatives that are out there that somebody might think about buying instead of you as the solution. So here it is, and then we can see what ChatGPT came up with. So I have absolutely no idea what any of these things are, but EHang 216F, cool. That seems similar. Auto flight firefighter eVTOL, AMSL. So I'm just going to use these just as my jumping off point. I don't know if these are actually real. Michael, you'll have to tell me if these are legit. But it's a starting off point for us to use as an example on this webinar as your potential competition. So, and then we got auto flight. Okay. And we got the third one there. We'll go K-Man, K-Max. K-Man, K-Max. All right, cool. So, if I'm doing this, I'm just going to do this. This is what I'm just going to do, like right here. So all I'm going to do is just start filling it in, like right. So this is my template. This is my hand-drawn version of it. Cool. So these are going to be my factors of the buy factors. Here are going to be the elements that people. I'm sorry. Here's going to be the competitors or other alternative solutions. We would say you are down here. And then, maybe we put, but, other things in here might be like, like I said, fire jumpers. Or it might be, what could it be? It would be, these tankers. Cool. All right. A couple examples. And of course, when you do this for real, this isn't a one and done. You're going to make a list, you're going to research, you're going to take some on, you're going to put some off. You're going to, work through this. And that's fine. This is always a messy process, but that's just, it just is what it is. Cool. All right, and then we've got, the government data. So let's take a quick look at the government data. Downloads, cool, I hope this is it. Contract Prime Awards, yeah, so let's just start with the Prime Awards. Cool. All right, so I'll blow up this. Why, oh, that's weird, oh, sorry, that was weird. It was like a double picture for me. Sorry about that. All right, so this is government acquisitions data. So this is all the data about all the different government contracts that have been won, or excuse me, that have been awarded, and we're going to go take a look at what it has to say. So the first one I want to look at is recipient. And sorry, let me blow this up a little bit so that you guys can see. All right. Cool. Hopefully that's a little bit easier to see now. All right, cool. So here I just did a Control F for recipient, and recipient UEI is the first one. That's the unique entity identifier. We don't necessarily really care about this. The one we're looking for here is recipient name. So, boom, and then just make it easier for everyone to read. We're gonna wrap the text. Cool. And then the other one is recipient name raw. So like there are like 3 different versions of the recipient name. This can be helpful if if the company has an older name that they used to use. So, but this is usually a good place to start. So this tells us, okay, these companies have been winning stuff in that space. Okay. The second thing I would encourage you to look for is just do a Control F, so for the description. And then this is going to, because this is the column we're looking for here. Okay. It's the Prime Award transaction, the Prime Base Award transaction description. So this is basically telling you, hey, this is what the government was buying. And just make it a little bit easier to, let's also just add the, all right, that just makes it a little bit easier for me. So cool. So it starts to allow you to say, it's like, hey, okay, Advanced Unmanned Aerial System Ground Station Interface Technologies. Okay, you know what? It sounds like that one might not actually be something that we're looking for. You can delete it. Okay, good. Future Airborne Collision Avoidance Systems. No, not your thing. Delete. And honestly, this takes a little while, but if you just start looking through here, you can start seeing, it's like, wait a minute. Okay, here are 3 or 4 other solicitations that sound like the sort of thing that I would do. You know, you might find something in here around like Forest Service, you know, heavy lift, aerial, UA, whatever it is. And then you can say, it's like, okay, that actually sounds pretty similar. And then you can come back here and you can see, it's like, oh, okay, who was that company? All right, it's, you know, whatever, Futron Aviation Corporation or whatever it is. And then when you find those things, well, you know, you'd come here and then you'd add them to your list. It's, you know, whatever, it's Boeing, it's Futron. Yeah. So here's where we have it. So like basically, so in a couple of minutes, you can start getting a hang of or getting a sense for, well, who are the competition that are out there, right? Cool. And you, of course, like I said, this isn't a one and done. You do it, you read about them, you get smart on them, you figure out, you know, what makes them special, why are they, you know, what makes that particular company special, what's their differentiator? Are they actually competitive with me? Or maybe it's like, based on the government contract, it sounded like they were, but when you go to their website, you realize actually, you know, they're doing something totally different. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The important thing is that you start to figure out which ones truly are alternative solutions to what you want to sell. Cool. So that's step one. We got our list of competitive products, or excuse me, of alternative solutions. Second thing then is to start thinking about, well, what is the customer going to consider when they're making a buy decision? When they're, you know, imagine they have a table and it's your solution and the E-Hang and the Autoflight and the Boeing and the Futron and, you know, the conventional, just scooping water with a cargo plane and the smoke jumper. It's like all the different ways that they could solve that solution. How are they going to choose which one to use? So, legitimately, if you guys have ideas about this, go and put it into chat. I'm just going to start spitballing here. So, I'm assuming that part of the buy decision is going to be price. You know, like the reality is, almost everybody has some sort of, price consciousness. Even the DoD is price conscious to a certain extent. So, one of the factors will almost certainly be price. Another one might be, how effective is it? As far as like, in this case, it might be, square feet covered per hour. I have literally no idea what the operational metric might be that a buyer would be considering. But if I were to think, I'm a fire response program manager, I'm in charge of figuring out how it is that we're going to respond to forest fires. I could imagine that the number of square feet covered per hour would be a metric. Cool. Or then maybe there's another one where it's like this is something that Michael's been pointing out a lot. So human safety. Human safety. So great. Human safety is probably a buy factor. I'm sure there's going to be, maybe there's something around reliability. And then, this is this dovetails in a lot with reliability, but it's like trust. I find that in mission critical systems, which typically the government is in, it's like you're in charge of defense. John, reliability, maintenance, modularity, life cycle support. I love it. Okay, let me add. I love that modularity because stuff always changes. So let's add modularity, and then life cycle support. Awesome. And of course, you'd be validating this with your customer discovery. And this is one of those times when iterative customer discovery is awesome. And I'm always amazed by how willing people are to talk to you if you have a really interesting solution. If you come to someone and say, "Hey, I've got this really clever solution that helps your community." You're a fire chief. You're somebody at the Park Service whose mission is to address forest fires. And you say, "Hey, I've really care about this, and I've spent the last 5 years designing stuff. Will you talk to me?" And they say yes. And if you have a good conversation and you're not trying to sell to them, at the end of the conversation you can say, it's like, "Hey, as my idea becomes more solid, would you talk to me again?" 99% of the time, people will say yes. So you could say there, you might have these buy factors be, your first draft, just like what we came up with here, and then whatever it is, 3 months later, you've done a bunch more customer discovery, and you realize, this one right here isn't on, or it's really, this people think about these two factors together. It's like actually I should combine those into one, whatever it is. This you can refine your list, and then as you're doing your research, so all you're going to want to do now is you're just going to say, okay, the EHang 216F, how does it rate on each of these things? And some of these might be hard numeric responses, like price. Okay, there is a price that you can probably find for the EHang. Is it reliable? You probably won't have access to set data around the reliability of the EHang of some of the smaller competitors, but at the very least, you can go figure out what you can. You can reach out to other customers, other people who've used it, whatever else it is, and do your best to be able to populate these things with the best of your knowledge. So that's pretty much all it is. Genuinely, this is 99% of the the competitive landscape slide. It's just figure out how the problem's being solved today. Figure out all the things that the customer is going to think about when evaluating which option to choose, and then putting in numeric as objective information as you possibly can into this table. So, and in case you just by way of just quick reference, something that everybody here should have a good comparison point for. I think Amazon actually does a really good job with this. Let me share my screen. I'll show you what I mean here. Boop, screen share. So if I come here to the Amazon website, they actually do a really good job doing solution comparison. So what could we do here? We could do whatever. I'm shooting on the ZVE10. That's the camera that I'm using. So let's take a look at that. So ZVE10. They put in the solution comparison table. Yeah, right here. So check it out. It's here's the Sony ZV-E10. Here's a bunch of other types of cameras. They've just limited themselves to Sony's, but frequently you'll see it's here's a competitor. Here's a Canon. Here's a Panasonic. All right, and here are the buy decisions. Across the side here, these are going to be the things that people use to make their price decision, or I'm sorry, their buy decision. It's what's the cost? When will it be delivered? Do people like it? What kind of display does it use? The size, the lenses. They've broken out what the most common buy decision elements are, and then they've actually given you a quantification. And this is almost to me a perfect competitive landscape slide, because it gives me here are all the elements that customers use to make a buy decision. here are all the other alternative solutions to what I'm trying to do. Here's how each one stacks up. And you know, if you just add like a little red, yellow, green to each of these boxes, it would be very easy to see. It's like, okay, this one's the best. And that's it. So cool. So that's all. That to me is the competition slide. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into chat. If you get a chance and you can like, I'm going to be posting this video. If you can like, leave a comment, subscribe, it is actually really, really helpful to me to help get this out there. You know, I am I am in VC, but the reason why I do these videos is because I remember what it was like being a founder. Like when I was starting my first 2 companies, using government grants, using government programs to try to get ahead, working in different, you know, just beating my head against the wall, trying to get people to pay attention. So I'm doing this because of my memory of how hard it is to be in your shoes. So all I'm trying to do is get this information out to more people to help you get funded and help me get better decks to help me make funding decisions. So I'll stay on for a little bit just to see if anybody has any questions. If you do, drop them in the chat. And then otherwise, yeah, I've got a whole YouTube channel just on dual-use decks, SBIRs, government grants, government programs to help people like yourself get ahead. Get in contact with me. Best way, just drop me an email at jeff@federal-foundry.com, or if you go to FedScout, fedscout.com, or app.fedscout.com, there's like a little chat bot in the lower right, and that goes to me. So feel free to drop me a chat on either of those methods. But yeah, like I said, I'll hang out for a minute. And if everyone's got their questions in, thank you so much for joining me and have a great day. Yeah, I don't think you can send documents in chat. Feel free to send it, you know, to my email. Yeah, you're very welcome, man. And good luck to you. Yeah, absolutely. All right. I've got a bunch more of these classes set up, so hope to see you in the next one. Bye.